So we are live now. H- Hello friends, I Mohana Chatterjee, project lead for the story Project 9 at www.tellmeastory.biz. Welcome you to the panel discussion with the contributors of Dandakaranya, the story Project 9. I'm a student of history and currently pursuing my PhD on the partition refugees rehabilitated in the Dandakaranya region. The Story Project 9, which is an anthology of poetry and short stories, is now available on Amazon Kindle. I request everyone to go through this wonderful collection and share their valuable feedback regarding it. Today we are going to discuss about the inspiration and the process that ultimately created this heart-touching anthology. This anthology is an attempt to culminate the strength required to fight away our inner fears and break the barriers to accept the unfamiliar novelty, symbolized as the Dandakaranya. I am privileged to have with us Sushobhana Bandyopadhyay, Shyam Sundar Pal, and Pooja Roy, and I take this opportunity to introduce our talented panelists to the audience. Sushobhana Bandyopadhyay works as a scientist at the Gene Therapy Program, University of Pennsylvania. She is a PhD holder in biochemistry. And for her, if science is passion, then literature is the love of her life. Pooja Roy is a keen observer of human nature. She is integrated by the chemical permutation and combination that makes up human nature, and it is this ingenia that she dares to capture in her write-ups. Shyam Sundar Paul is a senior research fellow and teaching assistant under the School of Humanities and Social Science, IIT Indore. His research interest broadly lies in films of Satyajit Ray, Bangla cinema, Rabindranath Tagore, Bangla short stories, and adaptation studies. So, now my first question is a common question that is addressed towards all the three speakers. Each one of you have done an excellent work in the Story Project 9. Every story or poem in this anthology narrates about a different type of Dandakaranya. So my question here is how did the story that you contributed here first came to your mind? Or shall I say, how did you perceive the idea of Dandakaranya as depicted in your story or poem? I would like to start with Shushavana. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Mohana. It's a wonderful question, and thank you for this invitation to be here with a wonderful panel. So, to your question, I would like to say that there is one subject that intrigues me a lot is the connect like the intrinsic relationship between people from different generations. So there is a very unique thing that you will find in India, and probably I have not seen that much in other parts of the world, where people from different generations live under the same roof. There might be people like having totally different perspective of the life and everything, but still they manage to live together. So you will see that even if within a family, if within a decade, the society changes, the economic condition of the family might change, but the struggles each of the family member faces, it's very personal, and the core of the struggle is always very same. So the stories around us is mostly about struggle individual faces when they are subjected to something which is kind of a social norm. So it's always a story of of their troubles they are facing when they are trying to live their own life, but there are situations where they cannot do it. So in this story, that is the subject which I try to portray a lot. And the way it correlates with Dandakaranya is that Dandakaranya is a place where a person is subjected to punishment against their wish. So, in the same way, I'm trying to see that how a person can face those troubles and come out over them, and also have a different perspective of life then. So, in my story, you will see that my protagonist doesn't have a name. So, that is the reason because I wanted the story to transcend among all the people we see every day, but they are anonymous to us, but they have their own struggles in their life. So basically, what I'm trying to say over here that that the trouble the father faces in the story is very similar to the trouble the son is facing, though they are people from the different generations. So the story has an inner line of a Buddhist philosophy, like to live is to suffer. But at the same time, people do not stop living because this suffering makes a life beautiful. And once you can overcome it, you come out as a very different person. The same thing that happens to people at Dandakaranya, because be it a be it a deity or be it a common person, they all go through the same pain, but they try to overcome that pain. So that's the how I perceive the idea, and I try to write the story around this frame, and probably that is the message I wanted to put out through the story, that even if there is suffering, life is still beautiful, and we have to work for that.
That's a brilliant answer, Sushobhana. And I have read your story, and it's very like beautiful. Like it does not give an happy, the typical happy kind of ending, but the ending is very beautiful in its own way. Like it teaches us to accept our Dandakarana also, because life
Yes.
is full of Dandakarana. We
Yeah.
cannot think about like living life without Dandakarana,
Yeah.
without any pain or suffering. Like everything perfect. Like
Yeah.
our lives are not picture or like
Yeah.
those happy comedy shows that we see, because
Yeah.
we have our own shares of pain.
Right.
So
Right.
and that you captured in your writing, and that is absolutely marvelous.
Right.
That's a great
Thank you.
job, Sharmana.
Thank you very much.
So now I'd request Pooja to answer the question. Over to you, Pooja.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It feels wonderful to be here. It feels wonderful to be speaking. It feels very cathartic because I see it everywhere. The issue that I'll be discussing now, it feels very cathartic to be here speaking on this issue, which is which everybody knows about, but maybe not widely acknowledged. Um, so the concept, I try to relate the concept of Dandakaranya with the experiences of the victim of child abuse. It is inspired by real life events that I witnessed happening in someone else's life from very close quarters. And I witnessed it happening through childhood, well into adulthood. So, whatever I expressed in the poem came gushing forth. It is very visceral. And even as a teacher, I have seen certain students who are victims of child abuse, but they are unable to express for one reason or the other. So, but inadvertently it comes out in their essays. Their eyes give way. It comes out in their through their body language. So what I gathered was that children's voices are not always paid to in the adult world. We as adults are not always very ready to listen to children, to what they have to say. And probably they are afraid to express, sometimes inarticulate to express. Sometimes it is defined as inappropriate to express, especially if the abuser happens to be a parent. So, and sometimes they themselves don't know what is happening unless they are well, they reach a certain age. So I, through this poem, I try to give voice. So you see the title is The Phantom Called Ellipsis dot dot dot. The child is too afraid to take the name. So I tried to give voice to this silent suffering of a child when the fulcrum of support, the greatest anchor in anyone's life, parents, one parent, when they turn out to act like a predator, when they happen to be the abuser, what would the child do? Economically dependent, a minor, cannot take decisions, unable to take decisions, and cannot take. Where does the child go? But what does the child feel but trapped? And it's the parent. The child has to go through that seemingly eternal drudgery. The child feels trapped in a home. A home is synonymous to security, protection, shelter. But when that home becomes a predatorial environment, the home is no less than a forest, and the parent no less than a predator. So this entire abusive environment makes the experience of the child being being in a Dandakaranya. So that is how I try to trace the concept of Dandakaranya to child abuse, experiences of child abuse.
That is simply marvelous. Like such sensitive topics, normally people refrain from speaking about them. Even in our day-to-day life, if we see, even if you see such incidents, our fast reaction to like to look into another direction, like nothing is happening. So it's really important for us to talk about such issues so that it can we can stop such incidents from occurring. And you have done a great job, Pooja, by like taking up such a important and significant topic. And now I would ask Shyam to say, share his opinion on the question. Over to you, Shyam.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me, and it feels really great to be with the people here in the panel. So, I think my story is a little bit different from the others. So, I based it on, my observation while I am, staying inside the academic institutions. So basically it is based on the very simple idea of food, the variation of food in India. We have our specific food culture, like the Bengalis, we crave for our rice and other things. And also in other parts of India we usually they have certain cravings for other kind of food. So what actually I noticed, while staying in the academic institutions, basically, the prestigious institutions in India where you find people from all other parts of the country. And I noticed, some way, some people, if they don't suffer, but they compromise, at least compromise with certain food. And that is what I have captured here in the story. And when you try to break that boundary of certain food that you are given in a certain place, now what can happen if you really try to break that boundary? And sometimes even that boundary is really restrictive, like you cannot just break it away. Sometimes it can lead to, if not dangerous situation, but it can lead to certain problems. So that I noticed from really very close proximity, I guess. So that I tried to capture here. That is how the story is based. And when you read it, you can feel it, like I think it's also very clear that how the food is that's why there are 5 characters in the story, and you'll find them from the each corner of the country. And you'll see that how various types of craving they have for different types of food, but coming to a different place which is not theirs, of course. And now when they suffer or they try to get that food, sometimes it can be, the result cannot be desired one, or it may be sometimes the problematic. That's what my story talks about, actually. And when I read about this Dandakaranya project, first of all, I read it and then I thought it might be completely mythological. Then I thought, okay, so here it is. I mean, this is really nice. We find it everywhere in the society, in each and every context, and it's so nice to relate with it also. So that in that way, it was really fascinating.
That's great, Sham. I have read your story and it's really amazing. Like you have said, we can find Dandakarana in our day to day things like food, clothing, everything. Like everything can turn into a Dandakarana. For everything, we have a boundary and we are expected to live within that. And anyone who is like trying to cross that is an aggressor and must be punished. So Sham has beautifully showed this angle from the perspective of food, and what we are expected to eat. Like we don't go into forest and ask a lion to like, "Oh, you eat only this and this," but we humans, we are much more actually live in cages than the wild animals. So that's a very good one that you showed. All three you have shown a different type of Dandakaranya, and all three are very much valid in our day-to-day life. So now I'll move on to the individual question. So my first individual question is for Shushobana. Shushobana, the leading character of your story has to go through multiple types of Dandakaranya at the same time. Poverty, failure, and the death of his guardian all struck him simultaneously. In this context, my question is, how should a person react in such a scenario? Over to you, Shushobana.
Well, it's a very individualistic thing. Like it also depends, like how a person is growing. So if the person is an introvert, then it's very hard to cope up with these pain or the struggles that the person is facing. And if a person manages to be an extrovert, then it becomes a little bit easier because you have ways to share your burden. But means despite the fact that how a person is, like whether the character of the person, I think basically the struggle is very personal, so you need to work on that. If somebody faces poverty or consequences which they are not expecting, I, according to me, there are ways to cope up that, because this is something which the society has given you, but it at the same time you do not have a total control on these conditions, because that is something which we call as fate, or or the place you, or the socioeconomic condition of the place you have born to and where you are growing up. But still there is a positivity where in every situation, like the son here faces the death of his father. But at the end of the day, he finds that the message he wanted to convey to his father, he already had received that before he died. So that is a kind of solace people can find in these situations. I find that everything is not very dark. It's only the way you look at a situation, the perspective of looking at it and trying to find out the silver lining in the cloud. Because once you try to do that, you will find new hope. And for coming out from every situation depends on how hopeful you are. So you should try, every person should try nurturing that to be hopeful, that to be optimistic, because things one day or the other will get better. So in that way, I find that having that hope inside you, or trying to find the hope inside you, will make you overcome every struggle in your life. So that was my answer to your, like, I'm trying to sum up, like how I might not be preaching anything, but I just want to make it like, be hopeful, whatever is coming, just be hopeful for the situation to come out of it.
That's a brilliant answer, Shishobana. As you say, just because we are struck with one problem, one Dandakarana, that does not mean that another one won't approach us at the same time. And our most common attitude is to label it as fate, and like my fate is like this. I'm so lucky, and or I'm so unlucky. But we should actually try to find a silver lining and to make something from a broken thing also. Like there is always one way or the another that actually leads us to a happy life, and we all we need to know is to just look for that one clue that can lead us to that truth. Okay, Shushabana. So now my next question is for Pooja. Pooja, through your poem you have dealt with a very sensitive topic. I applaud you for taking up such a controversial subject. You pointed out how the child abuses occurs in the hand of their own parents. Normally, such incidents take place behind the four walls, and the child is left to suffer on his or her own. How do you think such incidents can be identified and stopped? Over to you, Pooja.
Just as we are doing now, we need to speak about it more, we need to write about it more. So social sensitization is very much required. So society needs, society, relatives, we as adults, we need to acknowledge that the child abuser need not always be a stranger or an outsider. It can also be parents. Parents are glorified, they are glorious gods, but they can also be diabolic gods. That needs to be that needs to be acknowledged first by the society, and then only can they pay heed to the child. If a child comes up with an account of abuse by a parent, it should not be dismissed as a figment of imagination. It should not be dismissed as inappropriate, should something that should not be expressed, that should not be spoken against. It should be paid heed to. So the child has to be given some respect. The child has to be seen as a personality. So the school and teachers play a very important role, because the child is also with the school and teachers during the formative years. So we as teachers also have to be very observant, very alert, such that when the child is coming up with any account, it needs to be given, it needs to be dealt sensitively. Because we watch this has been depicted in movies, various movies also, Bagbondi Khela, Girl in Yellow Boots, Uran, to name a few. But when we see it in a movie, we sympathize it as something that happens to others, but we also need to acknowledge it, we need to empathize it as something that can happen to me and mine. The sensitivity, more sensitivity is required towards the issue. The child needs to be given more respect. And when it is happening within the family, the other parent needs to take a firm decision, very firm decision, irrespective of what the society. That is where most parents back out. The other parent back out in most cases, backs out in most cases. So that is where the parent needs to take a bold step in stopping the torture, even if it means separation, irrespective of what the relatives have to say, irrespective of what the society has to give its verdict as. So more sensitivity, and with this social sensitization, the more socially sensitized we are, will also give more encouragement to the other parent, who is probably a hapless, helpless observer, who can't do, forced by other compulsions. So this would also give more strength, more courage to the other parent to put a stop, because it has to be stopped. Otherwise, it becomes the phantom for the child. The child abuse may stop in due course, but that abuse remains as a phantom. Just as I named my poem, the phantom called ellipsis dot dot dot. So it remains as a phantom for the child. So the torture has to stop at any cost. So more social sensitization, more observant and sensitive souls, I think, will be able to provide some solution to half the job, provide some relief for the child. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pooja. As you have rightly said, like when a child is saying something, we should pay more attention, more heed to whatever he or she is telling. Sometimes we might feel that this child is making up stories, but even stories contain some amount of truth. And in school, because school is the second home for all of us. So if one child feel in danger in one home, he or she should definitely turn up to their school, their teacher, and these teachers should definitely understand the pain, the agony this child is feeling, and they can truly understand the situation and help the child. So great job, Pooja. So now we would move on to Sham. And so, Sham, your story vividly points out the fact that how we live within the boundaries of Dandakaranya drawn for us by the society. In this respect, we have to constantly compromise with our own choices. From our preference of food to our clothing, we are constantly monitored by the society, and anyone who tries to break free from this Dandakaranya is heavily punished by the social norms. How do you think this affects our personality as a whole? Over to you, Sham.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think about personality, when you are in your domain, when you are in your own place, it may not affect you, or you may sometime, try to find some solution. But, think of a situation when you are not in your place. Like, is, as the story is based on students, activities. So I would like to find out that, sometimes like we go away from state or from country, then you are in a different country, so in that situation the things are not in your control. So in that case, when you try to break that away, so you might face the problem. And food is also, it's not simply, it's not a thing. It has some other connotations also. Like it can be social, it can be political, it can be cultural. So in that case, for some places, they have certain boundaries, like certain predicaments, certain do's and don'ts. You can't do that, you can't do that. Not only some places, even, some people, to some people, this is sacred, this is not sacred, you can't have it, you can have it, you are forced to have it. So in that situation, your personality, then this question comes that, what about your personality? Why don't I keep up as myself, then, and if you want to break that in that time, it's hard, the consequences may not be in your control. I mean, I know, like, it's your personality that you will really try to be yourself, but sometimes it may not work the way you want. That is something that, I observed, I may not have experienced, I mean, in myself, but I have seen people, and I have seen, how they suffer, how they compromise, and sometimes they really crave for what they actually desire for. And but when they don't get it, they can sometimes they can become, really, I mean, it's hard to explain, but sometimes they can really become the, let's give it a try, let's see how it responds. But again, what I'm trying to point out, that, the situation may not favor you, and that's how your personality definitely affects your personality. But that's how the society is, as your question, says that, the society sometimes, it constructs certain boundaries, and we have to live with that. We are also social creature. You cannot break it, I mean, in a moment. But yeah, certainly we can ask for some change. Certainly we can see things in a different way. We can, we can raise our voice through writings, which I found really, I mean, I thought this is the best way to say about this thing, instead of raising your voice directly or in front of people, that, this is how you cannot do that, people may not understand you. But through this writing, you can, spread your voice across the globe. That's how it was. Thanks.
That's great, Sham. You have rightly pointed out that we are constantly bullied for our choices, and we don't have to be apologetic for liking something. If we like something, that is our personality, and we should unapologetically own it. But our society sometimes like they pressurize us and apply more harsh measures on us, and hence we cannot go out openly. But as you have pointed out, that we can use the tool of writing. It's a great tool, and anyone who feels cannot express him or her self properly should or must use this tool to express himself or herself. So now, uh, I would proceed to the last question, which again happens to be a common question addressed to us all three panelists. We all faces different type of dandakaranya throughout our lives. Casteism, patriarchy, insecurity being some very common ones that we have that we can find all around us. So, can you please share the experience of a dandakaranya that you have personally gone through, or how you came out of it, or still trying to come out of it? I would like to start with Pooja. Over to you, Pooja.
Growing up in a largely patriarchal family, there were always these male members to formulate the do's and don'ts, and female most female members of the family perpetuated it. So uh, as early as class 5 or 6, I was already it was already pointed out to me that while it was all okay for my brother to wear half pants and expose and sit with knees exposed, it was not. It was inappropriate for me because I was a girl child. Again, through my teens, I never wore jeans, skirt, jeans, pant. It was prohibited. Jeans was not supposed to be worn because I was a girl child. Uh, there was one particular male relative who, again, right from a very young age at social occasions, kept dogging me with the same suggestion that you are in a social occasion, so you should be in a traditional attire, that is sari. Why don't you wear a sari? What are these other salwar kameez and other things that you keep wearing? So, because you're a girl, because you're a girl. So it kept pricking all the time, and the whys and hows, they were very muddled up in my little brain then, but it kept working, it kept working. It I felt very wronged. I couldn't articulate then also, so it felt very wrong. While all around my cousins and all, they were all conforming to those do's and don'ts. So these hows and whys kept formulating, and before long, say 16 or 17, I learned to give back. It was the same particular male male relative whom I said that I appreciate your love for sari as a traditional attire. So why aren't you in kurta and dhoti? Why are you? Why do I see you over all these years in pants and shirt? This was a very simple statement, but the relative broke all ties with me. So I learned to unlearn few of those lessons of obedience, few of those lessons of politeness. I learned that as a girl. So all these do's and don'ts, it felt stifling. It felt like being a punishment. Girl child was like being a punishment. So it was a Dandakaranya of sorts for me. So I learned to give back. I learned that sometimes we need to be impolite, that all relatives were not worth keeping up contacts with. Some ties had to be broken for mental sanity. Some we have to be arrogant sometimes as the girl child. We have to be disobedient sometimes as the girl child. We have to be impolite sometimes as the girl child. We have to learn to say no, and no means no. So many movies also say so. And we have to learn to give back. Sometimes we need to give back. So while I have tackled the familial situation, there still exists the same problems in other spheres which need to be tackled all along. So I keep inspiring other girls, my students, uh, other female relatives. I keep inspiring them to give voice to their nose, to to learn to give back sometimes, to not always be polite and obedient to the extent of affecting one's self-respect, self-dignity. So that is, I think, one solution to end this patriarchal Dandakaranya. Thank you.
That's absolutely ultimately relate is like this kind of relatives. We all have at least one such relative who is like constantly nagging their nose, and we are told to not to disrespect, and they have the complete freedom to disrespect us. So Pooja, you have done a wonderful job giving back, and I think we should teach our younger generation to give such more comebacks and not to tolerate. Like we had to tolerate. Our parents taught us this is disrespectful, but we should teach our younger generation to be disrespectful, to give more such comebacks. And now I would request Shushavana to for her opinion. Over to you, Shushavana.
Well, I don't know if I would say the situation as Dandakaranya or not, because in Dandakaranya people go without their wish, but it was my wish to move over to a foreign land for education and job. But still, I must say, like, life as an immigrant in a foreign country is kind of a Dandakaranya situation for me, because when you come over here, you find a huge change in things like climate, food, like Shyam mentioned, like food, climate, cultural shock. And because you had been having a certain kind of lifestyle back at home, you will be missing everything over here, and you have to start fresh. You have to adapt new things. And at times, you will never have the support system that you had at home because of the different time zones. You don't you are stuck, basically. Like, the word is should be stuck. Like, your struggles are very personal because it is something which you have to do all by yourself, without anybody around you, or without any shoulder to cry or to even rant. Like, you don't have friends. So things are tough as an immigrant, because at the same time you need to be working professionally, and also emotionally you have to gather yourself and to perform every day. To And also, like, it's a what I must say, like, things change a lot, like, and the ability, like, to cope up with those changes, it might not be similar for every person, those who start as an immigrant in a new country. So yeah, that is a situation which I face. So, like, I must say, like, the struggle is still on. Some days are darker than the other days, some days are brighter, and so things go on like this. But uh, somehow you will, as I said, like, you need to work around those situations, because uh, it's something which you have chosen. So if the struggles are your like your own, so you need to work on that. So I'm still working on it, but a few things which I find, like, very much different, uh, like it had been if I had been in India. So what I feel, like, here you will find there are many immigrants. It's not only from India. There will be immigrants from around the world. You can meet a Chinese person, an African person, an European person. So it depends on you. Like, if you go out and start learning their cultures, or like the different kind of foods they have, so it becomes a very interesting place. Then you can pick and choose the things that you love to do, and also, like, not do the things that you did not want to do. And also, at the same time, it you can get access to things that you want to learn. For example, if you want to play tennis, if you want to learn to play piano, like, everything is like which you always wanted to do in your life. So those things become very accessible. So I think, like, engaging with the new community or the new lifestyle, and to be more proactive to things around you, gives you a very different perspective. Then you can feel like the world is a beautiful place when you have so many different kinds of people around you, because there is so many things to learn from other people, because they have a very different style of growing up, very different language, culture. So it makes you feel happy at the end of the day. You might be a little bit homesick, but that those are the ways I try myself to overcome the struggles that I have because of staying so far away from home. And also, like, you start using the technology, the social media, the platforms like this, where I get to meet, like, wonderful people like you all, like, and have a chat about it. So these are the things which keeps me going. So I feel like there are pros and cons anywhere in the world, but there are also ways to think about it, and to find out strategies to work on, like, to overcome those things and make it a happier place for yourself and everyone around you. So that's my take on my situation. Thank you.
Th- That's beautiful, Sushobhana. You have rightly pointed out that every Dandakarana has its own beauty, and sometimes we just need to find out that. Like, should not be always complaining that this is bad, this is bad. Like, if we try to accept some of it, we will actually find some good things also, even a problematic situation. And that's a very positive approach to life, and we should have it. So that's great. So now I would request Sham to please share his opinion. Over to you, Sham.
Oh, thank you. While thinking out this Dandakaranya in my personal experience, I was, thinking really that, like how to relate it. I would say ki, I am from a remote village in West Bengal. So my experience of Dandakaranya, it's kind of spatial. It's more like geographical. So back in 2012-13, when I was HS student, I mean 10 plus 2 student, so we didn't have any school nearby our village for studying post matriculation, I mean post madhyamik examination. So at that time I remember we had to go by bicycle or by bus to, I think, more than 10 kilometers to find a school where you can study your HS, or like next education career. So that was a kind of the undercurrent that I faced in my life when I saw it, and that was really challenging because you have to wake up really early in the morning, and then you have to pick up your cycle, and then you need to go. And this is also a kind of place which is surrounded by river. And river in monsoon time, it's really it comes to the brim. You remember that poem of A.K. Ramanujan, that river, that flooded river. So that time also, like, and we don't have any bridge over the river, so it's bamboo bridge, and that is really feeble, like once the flood comes and it washes it away. So during that time, you have only one boat, only very shaky boat. It's always tossing in the water, and with that boat you cross the river in the very in the dawn time, particularly in the early morning, to catch up that bus of by 6 a.m. in the morning. And generally in the winter time, I saw this thing, like I experienced in the winter time. It's really hard, because the sun comes up late, a little bit late. I think it's 6:30 almost, or 6. But that's bus timing is always the same. So you need to go, and I mean that I found really challenging. And it's kind of the undercurrent. It's natural the undercurrent, rather the undercurrent of disadvantages, because of this topographical or geographical situation of the village. And that is why I find it like not many students from our area. You will not find many students in our area. You will, I mean, they go for higher studies, or mm, not only higher studies, even I don't remember like student coming up after graduation and post graduation, or maybe carry forward their education in later part of their life. Yeah, because of that thing, I think, and that was kind of the underground. But nowadays it's really, I feel happy sometimes when I get a call from other fellow students or fellow boys from the area. And now I feel that they are also challenging this, the underground. You have to come out, and like there will be problems and situations every time, but you have to fight against them. And that is what that I found really, I mean, it's challenging, if not problematic, but it's just challenging, and you have to fight. Like, you can't wait for a bridge, or you can't change your geographical mm, situation. But yeah, one thing is sure, like if you fight, like that can bring you to other places where like you can be safe, and you can work properly, and you can do your things. That was my experience with the underground. Thanks.
That's really awesome, Sham. Like you have seen so much trouble, but still all these troubles were not able to break you. In fact, you break those trouble, and today, now you're the teaching assistant as well as a research scholar in IIT Indore, and a great round of applause for that. You have really shown a beautiful example that if we believe in ourselves, we can break and come out of any kind of dandakaranya. So, now, before concluding the session, I would request our panelists to read out their most favorite lines from their story or poem that they submitted under Story Project 9 Dandakaranya. I would like to start with Pooja. Over to you, Pooja.
Can I read out two lines?
Here, here. Absolutely.
You clanged the anvils of horror, and as I shut my ears, you snatched my playmates and placed phantoms in their stead. This is one. The other one. Sometimes I wonder, was it by mistake that I flinched at putting that poison in your food? Or was it because you were my papa? A word too profane for me, my birth giver, as they say. Thank you.
That's absolutely brilliant. Like her whole poem is actually very much heart touching. I would suggest all of you, all of our audience, to go through it. So, big round of applause for Pooja. So now I'd request Sushobhana to for the same. Over to you, Sushobhana.
Okay, so I have a couple of paras. So it goes as amidst the millions of stars in the sky, he chose one. Staring at that one as if he was speaking to his father, he said, I failed the exam, Baba. Probably I am good at something else. If only I could have shown you my notebook. Just like you, I know how to tell stories. I care for them. I do it much better than solving math problems. Wish my stories had a happy ending like yours. He shut his mouth tight so that his mother couldn't hear him crying. Sobbing silently had been an art that he had mastered a long time ago. An hour passed, and slowly, as the tears dried, his breath became normal. His empty gaze went back to the room to assure that he was not caught crying. In the half lit room, he saw the red cotton bag his father used to carry with him whenever he left home. From today onwards, the bag will miss its companion too. The significance of red had been very strong in his life. The failure, the bindi, the cotton bag had all become one. His wet eyes slowly made him unable to see the color for a long time. Colors do fade away with time, and so do failures and sorrows. He despised his life in the morning but had gained reasons to live in the evening. The virtue of life lies in the fact that it is uncertain, just like the Schrodinger's cat and Hamlet. He was uncertain about which sorrow was worthy enough to be sad of. Probably none. Certainly, it is not the sorrow that accompanies you. One is left only with the time and its increasing distance from the sorrow. Thank you.
That's absolutely brilliant, Shushabana. Especially my favorite, personal favorite, have been the feeding of colors line. You have beautifully portrayed that line. The whole, your whole writing is brilliant, but that line is like wow, simply wow.
Thank you so
So,
much. Thank you very much.
so big round of applause for Shushabana. So now I would request Shyam for the same. Over to you, Shyam.
Yeah, even I have a couple of errors. So I'll start. Ralston started sweating and shivering. His palms felt clammy. He slowed down the cycle speed and silently tried to cross over them. Suddenly, two bikers braked together as if they were having fun. Ralston, who was crossing them from the left side, lost control and collided with them. He fell on the road, and then the cycle slid away from him. With the beef untied from the plastic, came out of the bag and got scattered on the road. The bike stopped. One guy suddenly shouted in Hindi, what is it you are carrying? Ralston couldn't understand his words. Instead, he found his knees and elbows bleeding and tried to get up. A boy from behind pushed him to the ground again and shouted at him with his red eyes, is it beef you are carrying? Ralston deciphered what they were indicating and he was terrified. One guy kicked him on the arm, shouting, you are polluting the place with unholy food. Ralston tried to bring out the mobile, and one guy snatched it away and threw it away. They beat him endlessly until they saw the security van approaching them. They vanished from there, shouting their slogans. Ralston moaned in pain almost senselessly, and he was carried to the van for taking up to the hospital. As the van speeded up, the slogans gradually faded away. Thanks.
That absolutely brilliant, Sham. You have very nicely portrayed that how for this concept of polluting and unpolluting, we ultimately loses our own humanity. In the end, we are all like, after reading this, I think we all would be like worried for Ralston and pray for his safety. But you haven't told us like what actually happened to Ralston. Was he okay or not? And I think that's a very important part. Like, you have done a very good job over there, because it's sometimes good to leave the audience curious. So you have
Yeah,
absolutely kept us all curious, and that's a brilliant job. So a big round of applause for Nelson for that. So
thank you.
now I'd like to thank all three of our panelists for the very insightful conversation and for your time this evening. The anthology of poetries and short stories on the writing from Dandakaranya is now available on Amazon Kindle. I would suggest everyone to grab your copy right away and share your valuable feedback regarding it. I hope this anthology gives the reader the courage to overpower their inner fears and come out of their cocoon to explore the unknown, the Dandakaranya. Everyone, please stay safe, stay happy, stay, mm, and a very happy Diwali also, because Diwali is coming. And stay wherever you are, just stay happy. Good night.
Happy Diwali. Good night. Thank you.
Happy
Bye.
Diwali. Thank